the trade relationship between Canada and the United States has reached a boiling point, igniting a fierce debate. Is Canada ready to sever ties with its southern neighbor to solidify its trade with the European Union? With escalating tensions, Canadian lawmakers are threatening drastic measures, including a staggering 100% tariff on Tesla vehicles. Can they really follow through? What will the implications be for the automotive industry and beyond? These questions echo throughout the continent as both sides brace for impact. Historically, Canada has enjoyed a robust trading relationship with the United States, sharing a massive exchange of goods, from cars to dairy. But recent protectionist policies from the U.S. government have left Canada feeling cornered and agitated. President Trump has made alarming statements, suggesting that he could impose tariffs up to 100% on Canadian vehicles and metals, raising the stakes in this high-stakes game of trade. In retaliation, Canadian officials have boldly declared, "If you treat us this way, we'll hit back hard." The eye of this storm is pointed squarely at Tesla, a symbol of American innovation that could face immense repercussions if Canada enacts these tariffs. Experts speculate that targeting Tesla could stir political backlash in the United States, changing the dynamics of the ongoing negotiations. But how feasible is Canada's pivot towards Europe? The answer remains clouded with uncertainty. Despite being an alluring option, Europe's geographical distance from Canada introduces logistical hurdles that cannot be ignored. Although Canada has an established trade agreement with the European Union, experts caution that achieving a full-scale economic shift away from the U.S. is fraught with challenges. While Canada aims to strengthen ties with Europe, chiefly around metals and other essential commodities, the prospect of entirely replacing American imports is daunting. Moreover, Tesla's role in this conflict is pivotal. While the Canadian market has seen growing interest in Tesla vehicles, the potential for tariffs hangs ominously over the brand. A sudden price surge could disrupt sales dramatically, leaving Tesla vulnerable and Canadian consumers scrambling. Could this ultimately cause political fallouts in the U.S. as well? With all this on the table, can Canada survive and thrive without the U.S. market, or is this strategic maneuvering for leverage? As the rumblings of a potential trade war grow louder, both nations must navigate a complex web of dependencies. Secretary of State or not, the consequences of inaction could ripple through both economies and leave consumers on both sides feeling the heat. Could we witness Tesla caught in a crossfire, suffering the brunt of political actions, or will a different path emerge, leading toward a more constructive dialogue? The answers may reshape the future of North American trade dynamics. Stay tuned as this story unfolds. In a dramatic escalation of tensions, a senior Canadian politician has thrown down the gauntlet, stating that Canada may impose a staggering 100% tariff on Tesla vehicles, a brand cherished by Donald Trump. This audacious threat targets not just a company but a symbol of American innovation in electric vehicles. By singling out Tesla, Canada aims to create ripples in U.S. politics, aiming to bolster its bargaining power within the automotive market. But the heart of the matter lies in whether Canada can genuinely pivot towards deeper ties with the European Union. The complexities become evident when examining trade data. The U.S. remains Canada's closest and largest trading partner, with an intricate web of trade relationships that has flourished for years. Can Canada simply disengage from this relationship? The doubts are warranted. Nonetheless, Canadian officials assert that they are prepared for a trade war, thanks in part to an existing comprehensive agreement with the European Union. While Europe is geographically distant, its lack of protectionist barriers stands in stark contrast to the tariffs proposed by the Trump administration. However, analysts caution that Europe cannot fully replace the U.S. market due to transportation challenges and varying standards. Canada is striving to find alternatives, particularly in the metals sector, as it eyes a potential shift towards Europe to mitigate the financial blows from the U.S. Could this be a bluff? If Washington thinks Canada lacks alternatives, it might be underestimating its northern neighbor. While fully abandoning the U.S. market is unlikely, closer ties with Europe could provide some relief. Amidst these trade skirmishes, Tesla finds itself at a pivotal crossroads. As a beacon of technological advancement, Tesla has established a loyal customer base in Canada and has explored sourcing raw materials locally.
However, the looming threat of hefty tariffs could lead to soaring prices for Canadian consumers, stalling sales and damaging the brand's standing in North America.
As the potential for retaliation looms, the implications of this trade dispute extend beyond simple tariffs, beckoning debates within U.S. domestic politics about the future of technology and manufacturing.
With the prospect of spiraling conflict, both nations stand to lose.
The delicate balance of trade hangs precariously, leading to calls for compromise.
Could a resolution emerge that spares Canadian car exports from crippling tariffs? Might we witness a scenario where economic interests intertwine with political realities, pushing both sides to negotiate a path forward? In the evolving landscape of international trade, how will Canada strategically navigate its relationship with both the US and Europe? The stakes have never been higher, and with the eyes of the world watching, the outcome remains uncertain. A fierce trade showdown looms.
The United States has threatened a 100% tariff on Canadian cars and metal, while Canada teases a matching strike aimed at the most iconic American brand.
What if the very symbol of US tech power becomes the first casualty?
Tesla, the electric car titan, stands at the heart of the conflict. Its sleek models have already found a loyal fan base north of the border, and executives have whispered about building factories or sourcing raw minerals directly from Canadian deposits.
Now the specter of a steep duty hangs over every battery pack.
If the tariff hits, Canadian buyers could see prices soar by thousands of dollars, and sales might grind to a halt. The mineral wealth beneath Canada's tundra, lithium, nickel, cobalt, is a treasure chest for electric vehicle batteries.
CEOs once dreamed of shortening supply chains by pulling these ores across the border, but the looming tax threatens to shatter that plan.
Impose a 100% charge and we will redirect our resources elsewhere, a Canadian official warned, eyes fixed on the American auto sector. Across the continent, the manufacturing puzzle is intricate. Steel and aluminum roll out of Canadian mills, travel to Midwestern assembly plants, and the finished cars often circle back to Canada. A single punitive duty would crumble this delicate dance, sending factory alarms ringing, the hiss of molten metal cooling, and workers hearing the rustle of empty production lines.
Prices would spike, prompting furious consumer outcry. Why does my ride now cost an extra $5,000? Factories could shutter, unemployment rise, and both nations end up empty-handed. A lingering question haunts the market: can Canada pivot to the European Union, or is this a bluff to force a deal? Canada has already offered a fallback plan.
While the United States tightens its grip, Ottawa points to the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with the European Union, a pact that largely wipes away tariffs.
The EU market, though distant, could absorb Canadian metal and auto parts, especially if green steel initiatives take root. Imagine sleek German sedans fitted with Canadian nickel, the faint scent of fresh alloy mingling with the aroma of European forests.
Yet the logistical nightmare remains.
Shipping costs climb, standards diverge, and the sheer distance adds time and expense.
Europe's 500 million consumers present a tempting audience, but competing producers already crowd the market. Still, the promise of a tariff-free corridor offers Canada a bargaining chip, a reminder that it will not be cornered.
If Washington pushes a 100% levy, will European leaders rush to the table, or will the transatlantic supply chain buckle under the strain? The stakes are high, the tension palpable, and the next move could reshape North American industry forever. Will the EU step in as a savior, or will both sides watch their markets melt away? What if a single threat could turn two longtime allies into rivals overnight?
President Trump warned that a 100% duty could fall on every Canadian car, every ounce of steel and aluminum crossing the border. In retaliation, a senior Canadian lawmaker vowed a matching 100% tax on the most iconic American symbol of the electric car boom, Tesla. The move is not about numbers alone, it targets a brand that stands for U.S. technological pride and fuels political firestorms. Will Ottawa actually raise the levy, or is the threat a bargaining chip meant to force a concession? The last paragraph showed an escalating tariff war. Now Canada eyes a distant lifeline, the European Union. Under a comprehensive economic and trade pact, most duties disappear, and a market of nearly 500 million consumers awaits. Europe offers no steep tariffs on Canadian metals, and green steel collaborations could spring up, easing pressure on steel and aluminum sectors. Yet the Atlantic span means higher freight costs and longer delivery times, turning the plan into a costly gamble.
Can Europe step in swiftly enough to keep factories humming, or will logistics crush the strategy?
The previous section described Europe as a potential plan B and the logistical hurdles involved. If tariffs rise, the ripple spreads, highway shipments stall, factory floors quiet, and car prices jump $5,000–$1,000 overnight, shocking shoppers on both sides of the border. Mexican plants, linked through the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, would also feel the shock, turning a bilateral spat into a regional crisis. Analysts predict a compromise may emerge, perhaps a reduced duty rather than a full 100%, while both sides keep their most dramatic threats as cards on the table. Will the dispute settle into a middle ground, or will it spark a wider trade clash that drags continents into the conflict? As tensions escalate between Canada and the United States, the automotive and metal industries find themselves on the precipice of conflict. The close partnership that once flourished under what was known as NAFTA, now transformed into the USMCA, hangs by a thread. With the threat of steep tariffs looming, the ripple effects will undoubtedly spill over into Mexico, further complicating the intricate web of North American trade relationships. Imagine that decisive moment when the winds of change sweep through the corridors of power. What if negotiations falter? This uncertainty fuels the anxiety of countless workers along the automotive supply chain. The thought of factories shutting down reverberates like a thunderclap, a warning sign of a brewing storm. If tariffs are imposed on Canadian vehicles, Mexican factories will not just watch from a distance, they will be thrust into chaos, grappling with falling production and rising unemployment.
And what about the European Union? Could they spring into action as the US tightens its grip? The flickering hope of expediting fresh negotiations could be the lifeline Canada desperately seeks. Leaders across the pond might enthuse, let's turn this crisis into an opportunity. The specter of a new global trade war looms ominously, a portent of heartbreak not just for Canada and the US, but for the entire world economy. Yet let's not forget the underlying reality: Canada cannot simply sever ties with the American market without peril. Geography is both its friend and foe. Proximity to the US offers unparalleled access, a valuable edge that no one can undermine.
However, the burgeoning ties with the European Union present an alluring alternative. This plan B is not without its challenges, though. Europe's fierce competition, rising shipping costs, and the struggle to replace the American market weigh heavily on the plans to shift trade relationships.
Don't underestimate our resolve, echoes through the halls of Parliament.
Canada is sending a clear message: there's always a door to Europe, and they're ready to negotiate. In this game of diplomatic chess, Canada aims to wield its position as a strategic bargaining chip, ensuring that both countries understand the stakes. But it's not just about political maneuvers, it's about the tangible reality for ordinary people. A protracted trade battle rarely favors anyone but creates a multitude of casualties. Prices soar, factories close, and the burden falls on consumers on both sides of the border. The unthinkable could happen, a scenario where Canadian car exports dodge the brunt of tariffs while the US gains negotiated benefits.
Still, one question looms large: will Canada genuinely pivot towards Europe, or is this merely a strategic feint? And in this volatile environment, what role will Tesla play? As they navigate this volatile landscape, will they find themselves unwittingly caught in the crossfire, facing dire consequences? The road ahead is fraught with uncertainty. Only time will tell how this intricate dance between power, strategy, and survival will unfold. As tensions escalate between Canada and the United States, the possibility of Canada shaking off its reliance on its southern neighbor is becoming a hot topic. Instead, could it forge stronger bonds with the European Union? Or is this just a bargaining tactic?
Tesla, caught in this crossfire, may face the dire consequences of political maneuvers and retaliatory tariffs. Picture this: the crisp sound of metal clashing as trade policies draw battle lines across North America.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
Canada, once a steadfast ally of the US, has found itself cornered by harsh protectionist policies imposed from Washington.
With whispers of 100